us up there too. Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is our very first deep dive. This deep dive is on school age concerns. And what I have... Oh, okay. No, you're fine. You're fine. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over, and they'll introduce themselves and the topic. And then we have some slides as well. So here we go.
Okay. Good morning. Still, my name is Ruben Quiros. I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist. I also specialize in liver disease and work with the liver transplant group at Nebraska Medicine in Omaha, Nebraska. I have been interested in Alagille syndrome since my fellowship in the mid-90s, and we had some research at that time and still remain involved with the Alagille Syndrome Alliance. I have been involved for many, many years now. And obviously this is a disease process that I have really keep close to my heart. Has really been important for me to care for these kids. And obviously today we're going to talk about issues, school age concerns. I want to spend a lot of time talking about some of the issues that our panelists are more expertise on, because they are on the daily basis educating kids at different levels. But obviously the spectrum of the problems varies from sometimes there may be some learning disabilities, sometimes there's nothing in regard to ability to learn, but sometimes also kids with chronic illnesses and looking different sometimes can have some different struggles at school. And some of them are medical, obviously, and some of them are kind of the classical, unfortunate things that we have to work on. Most of the time also to make the school system to understand that we sometimes need special programs for these kids at school. Anyhow, I won't spend more time. I will let the rest of the panel introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Chanda Turner, and my warrior is 8-year-old Kate over there, sitting in the back, hanging out. I'm going to try to get her to talk to you guys later. We'll see if it works out. Yeah, she's like, no. And then my other daughter, Ellen, is over there as well. I am an Alagille mom, but also an educator by training. I am a health teacher by background and by training. My specialty was puberty and sex ed in middle school and high school, so if you need any help with that, I'm your girl. Happy to talk about it. And then I'm now a district administrator. I was a district school health coordinator for a number of years, overseeing health education, health services, and those sorts of things in a large school district. But for the last 3 years, I've moved on. I'm now director of curriculum, instruction, and assessment at a school district, overseeing all things teaching and learning. So I'm hoping to help craft a conversation today that can help you really think about the strategies that might be available for your kids.
I'm Ryan. I'm Kate's dad. Teach high school biology, AP bio, taught human anatomy and physiology in the past. Think I'm going into my 17th year teaching high school. So I bring certainly a high school perspective lens, but also the perspective of a parent with a child working her way through elementary school.
I'm Marcus Walker. I am a father of an Alagille warrior, Gabriel. He's 6. We haven't actually entered him in school yet because we didn't know how he would wake up. Yeah, he doesn't sleep very well. So hopefully this fall he'll be able to start. I am actually a soccer coach at a college, so I'm not an educator, but I've got that background, and I'm an educator by association as my wife's a teacher. So.
And she's here.
And she's here. Yeah, she's selling stuff right now. So awesome.
That's an important job.
Yeah.
And Ben Jakes is here in the front row. He also is an educator out of Canada, and so he is our resident expert on all things world language instruction and Canada. What else? Should I throw some other things in there? I called him my sidekick earlier. I don't know if you like that. What was that? It's got to be. Yeah, there's got to be some hockey in there. Whoops. Go back. That's actually what. So we put some slides together. Please think this is not a presentation. It's just that we come from so many perspectives, and there are so many challenges with education that we didn't want to get down any one rabbit hole and spend our whole hour together talking about one person's really big challenge and then never get to anything else. So we really want to structure our conversation to make sure that you guys can all kind of walk away with some things you feel good about and know where to go next. So please recognize Ruben. If you see a beautiful woman sitting next to him, it's probably Molly. She's an experienced educator. Ryan, Ben, myself. I'm going to call out Kathy Turner. Put your hand up there. That is my mother. She taught kindergarten for 34 years. And also is now at the university level. She oversees pre-service teachers as they do their student teaching as well as teaching courses. She's an excellent expert as well. We are all here. We can answer your questions anytime. If you want to bring us, this is what's going on with my kid, we'd be happy to problem solve with you. So please don't think if you're not getting it in this session, we're here all weekend and we're happy to help. It's our passion. Am I supposed to talk about this one? Anyway, okay. So just to get an idea first before we start, how many of you are have your kiddos in U.S. schools? Okay, how about outside of the U.S.? Excellent. Okay, good to see you. Perfect. All right, so this is where I give you our United States friends a little bit of bad news. I will not be talking about IEPs. I will not be talking about 504s, and I will not be talking about health plans or anything related to that law because it doesn't apply to all of us. It only applies to those of us in the States. If you're super interested in that topic, tomorrow come see me, and we will talk all things special ed law, which while he was geeking out at the genetics sessions, I geek out about special ed law. So come see me, passionate to talk to you about that. But today we're going to stick more to the strategies and concerns side and try to stay out of that, what about my IEP, what about my 504 piece. Okay, so next question. How many of your kids aren't in school yet? I know Ruben's little one not in school yet. Preschool, okay, perfect. Preschool, yep, okay. And then how many elementary, grade K to maybe 5 or 6. Yep, okay, perfect. Middle school, do we have some middle school friends in the room? 5 to 8, 6 to 8, okay, excellent. And then high school, any high school? High school, okay, all right. Sorry, that's just gonna help me make sure that we spend the right amount of time on the right stuff so you all get some information. Okay, and then we always put, every presentation we can't help putting pictures of our kids, and that's our littlest fluffy baby that didn't come with us. Okay, so today, I spent a ton of time with Roberta and Cher on the phone trying to think, how can we make this useful for you? So our goal today is to talk about what those concerns are at each level and make sure that we're all sharing with each other strategies, because I'm sure in this room there are tons of people that have things that are working for them and people that have challenges, right? You have a challenge and you probably have some stuff that was working for you. That stuff that's working for you might be a solution for someone else in the room. So that's what we want to bring here today, okay? Does that make sense? Are we good? Okay. So shut up, yeah. So I thought we would start with the transition to school. I'm gonna give this to you. So transition to school, we have some tips, and then I wanna hear what else you all have to say. So when you're coming into school for the first time, your kid's a preschool kiddo, what should you do? Some recommendations in my experience, both as an educator and as a parent, is do your research. Get on your local school district, find out how your local public school district works. If you're in an area that has private schools that are an option for you, or something else, know what's out there for you, and start to see what you can find out. You can find out a lot on the websites or on the parent groups, Facebook groups in your town. Big ones for me: does the school have air conditioning? Because I don't know about your warrior, but mine wilts when it gets hot. She cannot be in a school that does not have air conditioning. Does this school have air conditioning? Am I going to have to do something about that? Communicate early and often. When Kate went to kindergarten in January of that year before, I sent an email to the school principal and to the nurse, and I said, hey, I just want you to know, Kate's coming. She's coming in the fall. And when you see her paperwork, you're going to think, oh boy, what's coming? And so I just wanted to reach out and say, hey, we're here. We're happy to come talk to you anytime. I linked just a couple of Alagille articles, not a lot, just a little bit. Didn't want to scare them off right away. I just said, she's coming. Here's some information. Happy to talk to you at any time. And then they did. And what was nice is it wasn't like all the week before school started. We talked a little in February, and then we talked a little in March. And then when she came in for screening, they were like, oh, wow, she looks great. Compared to paper, yes, you're right. So that if you give them kind of that long runway to then have the tools and build the tools, I think it really helps. And not to say, in January, I was saying, and I want to meet next week. I was just like, I'm just going to put this right here. You let me know when you're ready to talk about it. Okay. So that is something that worked well for us. And then the other thing that worked really well for us, we had a great preschool. She was in a really strong, happened to be Montessori program. With the preschool teacher who happened to be a very good friend of ours from college, so that helped a little bit. But making sure that she put together all the information about what Kate's strengths were as a learner and where she would need supports, and making sure that that then got to the school and got to her new teacher so that there could be some continuity between schools. So that's sort of some successes and strategies that we've seen in transition to school. I maybe would open up to see who else. Anyone else have some things that worked really well for them as their kiddo came into school? Should I run this?
You're good. At least you got my name right that time.
So what worked for me, transitioning my daughter, and she's been in public school the whole time, and she's about to transition into middle school. I actually created almost like a little resume, which just had her picture and a little bit about her personality, and also just an outline of what to expect, like, hey, if she's itching, don't freak out. You know, this is what's going to happen. If her eyes are yellow, don't freak out. Don't call 911. You know, that's expected. So instead of sending them to alagille.org or having them Google all this information, I created a simple bio, very easy language, with her picture showing that she's still a normal kid. And that has been a huge help. And I try to get that in front of her teachers early on, including her nurse, because even the nurses that have to provide services to your child, a lot of times they've never heard of Alagille syndrome. So I try to be proactive in that sense by having a kind of like a little resume of who she is from a medical perspective.
No. I got now. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea, because I have found out that sometimes you give too general information about Alagille. We were saying not all the kids are the same because of the spectrum of disease, and sometimes heart conditions may be more important for a child than liver disease, or in that way I think the school can get better ready and don't be too concerned about certain things that the kid doesn't really have.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. We have two more, I think, here.
We did something similar. We created a letter to the school, and I find it's very important to start bottom up rather than top down. Don't go to your district first. Go to your principal and talk to them and the teacher. We did it. My daughter is now also transitioning into middle school, and we did it from the first year of elementary. It worked with every teacher, with every principal. We always had great results that were very receptive and very helpful into everything that she needed. The one thing that we did do also is that we watched the first week or two of school. And in kindergarten, she had a lot of xanthomas, and it very quickly became a problem that the kids were pointing and poking and asking, telling her that she was contagious. So we talked to the teacher, and the teacher said, I guess it's time to talk to everybody. So she collected all the kids. There was 100 kindergartners, and she asked my daughter if she wanted to speak to them, and she did. And she did a little presentation, kind of, here's what I have, and you can ask any questions. You can ask questions now and never again. So once you leave this room, please leave her alone. And it worked wonderfully. We did it in the kindergarten, we did it in the first grade, and we didn't need to do this again.
Kindergarten teacher in front of you is grinning pretty. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Jennifer here, Marcus.
What we did, my daughter's 7, going into 2nd grade. The Alliance actually has a packet that they can send you with a lot of information, but it's a lot of very general information. What I did was I kind of went through it and I took out the pages that didn't apply to her, and I asked her doctor to write a letter to the nurse and say, these are her restrictions, and that's it. This is what she has to have in school. There's nothing else. If you have any other concerns, please call me. And, and as far as her being pointed at or transitioning into school, we kind of let her take the lead. And it was this past year, at the end of the year, where she decided she wanted to sit down and talk to her class about Alagille in very simple terms, because they were in first grade. But it's worked for us, and we have very frank conversations with the teachers very early, probably end of the summer. With every new teacher we sit with, thankfully she's had like IEPs and things that we're not going to talk about, but they have the information. But as far as her personality and things that could affect her in the classroom, we've always kept a very open communication with her teachers. I go at least 3 times a year to talk to them and kind of keep up. And if she has any, and that's one of the important things that has helped us a lot with the transition to school, if she has any changes in her medical, we always bring them to the school and say, this is what's new, and this is how we're going to handle it, and that's the end of it.
So those are like great ideas. Thank you, everyone.
I guess it's on.
We have one more.
Oh,
That's okay. I can
No.
wait. So this, you might bump me and say, no, not right now. My question is not as much about my Alagille's child, because that child does have laws that protect them, does have some parameters, and does at some level have that sympathy vote from the teachers, which we actually, full disclosure, we don't classroom school anymore. We homeschool, not just because of the disease, for a variety of reasons in our life, but our experience with trying a classroom school, our challenge was actually with the siblings. And, going in and saying, this homework packet isn't complete because I was at the ER last night until 2 a.m. with my sibling, and we didn't even have dinner last night, let alone a homework packet. Even as my son transitioned into high school in a classroom and was fairly autonomous, but he was bipolar, so there's still some executive functioning and things not going on with him, and so to have to sit down with teachers and be like, Daniel lied to us because he said he hasn't even seen you in the last 3 days to get this paper signed. And I'm like, so Daniel didn't lie to you. And to be fair, he could have texted me and said, hey, I need this paper signed. But I did say, don't contact me unless it's super important, and we just had a misunderstanding on what super important was.
Yeah,
How do
I
you
totally
challenge
hear
the
you.
siblings?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a huge challenge, I think so, because we forget that the siblings are so deeply affected. So what I would say in this case is come see me, and I'm happy to problem solve that with you. And I might actually even push you over to Ryan over here as a high school teacher. I think he really can give you some awesome, advice about how to handle that. Yeah, I would say I could spend another hour just on that. So in the interest of, let's be clear, I could spend an hour on pretty much anything, but particularly these topics. So we had, sorry, no, this is you.
So as we were sitting down thinking, we kind of just came up with, what might be some sort of broad topics that are relevant across multiple ages and also hopefully relevant across a lot of different families. So we came up with these ideas of attendance, medications, academic growth of our children, the social, emotional well-being component that comes with Alagille, and then open up sort of to a larger discussion about anything that is relevant for all of us here in the group. So these kind of similar topics repeating across each of the different age groups.
So does this kind of hit on like everyone's biggest concerns, or are there like other big concerns you were hoping to like maybe get a little advice about today? Yell it out, I'll repeat it.
I think what you have planned is enough for us as parents, but maybe it would be interesting to have some advice directly for high school children.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna keep it moving. Yeah, as best we can.
My concern is also like germs.
Okay, and we're concerned about germs. Yeah, no, that's a great one.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we threw together some strategies that have worked for us around this area, and then again, like really hoping to open it up to all of you and hear what successes you all have had. So my biggest thing around elementary school is spend some time knowing what your kids need to know, because don't tell any of my teachers I told you this. Not everything's important. Actually, that's not true. I tell my teachers that all the time too. But not everything's important, right? So when you look at the standards of your state or your country, a lot of times you have topic area specialists that have made this. So I'm going to throw the science teachers under the bus because there's one here that when a science teacher writes science standards and says what is important for them to know, the list is very different than me as a health teacher would have made. Same with a social studies teacher. If they said what's important for everyone to know in social studies, the list gets really long. And at the end of the day, do they need all of that to be successful in the world? Maybe, but maybe not. So I think, when you look at what it is that, on report cards and all these things that we're seeing, a lot of those things, they're all important in their different way, but some of them are more important than others. And when you're dealing with a really sick kiddo, you got to make priorities, and you should prioritize those knowledge pieces that are the most important. For the elementary grades, particularly K2, I'm going to tell you that's reading. Again, don't tell my district because I'm trying to get them to pay attention to math right now, but math is also important, but for those K to 2 in particular, grade 3, reading is the most important. So if you're doing nothing else with your child, it should be working on those skills. So really have a conversation with your teachers, really kind of do your research out there to say, what is it really that my kid needs to know? And narrow it down and prioritize, because they're not going to be able to do everything all the time, and it's okay to have them focus on things that are really important. So don't feel overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, they're behind in 10 subject areas. Who cares? What's really important? And there are some resources. I'll try to put them out somehow. Boston Public Schools has an excellent family guide. It was so good, I then stole it and reworked it for my former district, Portland Public Schools. You can also find it there. They have grade level guides that give you bullet points of what kids should be able to know and do by the end of each grade level. And it's been translated into really easy, family-friendly language. And then it's also been translated into, mine was in 9 languages. Theirs is in like 15. So that's a great resource for you.
One of the things that has worked for us is we know we've had these conversations with the teacher, and we know what their work is going to be like for homework, for example, and classwork like for the week. And we can break it down for her. Like, for example, she has 5 appointments on Wednesday. Well, then we don't do any homework on Wednesday. And we kind of shift all the work that she has to do. And if we have to ask for the weekend to get, for them to give it to us the weekend before so we can actually complete it at a better pace, then they'll be able to do that because they're willing to. So talk to your teachers. They'll be able to tell you what to focus on, whether it be weekly or monthly or whatever. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Thanks, Jennifer. Get to know your school nurse. I think that's kind of a given for all of us. Become their best friend. Kate's nodding because the nurse in her school is like one of her favorite people. Nurse Deb, we love her. Shout out if you're watching, Nurse Deb. We just love her. She's amazing. But we have cultivated that relationship over time, and it's really important to do that. Communication, but home and school, exactly what you were saying. Don't be afraid. All right, so this is now, I was director of family engagement for a school district for a while, so this is now this side coming out. Do not be afraid to demand information from your teacher. most of the time, they're probably just waiting for someone to ask, right? And so for me, that comes down to, and this kind of bleeds into supplemental learning at home. They tell you, hey, my kid is struggling in reading. Well, as an educator, I'm thinking, okay, well, are they having trouble with phonemic awareness? Are they having trouble with comprehension? Are they having trouble with fluency? Are they having, pick a skill? Because reading mean nothing. So to be able to come in and say, okay, you said my child's struggling in reading. What is it that they're struggling with? And teachers love to use the words and the acronyms. And it's okay to say, yeah, can you translate that for me? And say, what is it specifically my child is struggling with? And what is it I can do at home to help? Because sometimes it's the simplest things. I look for road signs with they're struggling with identifying these 4 letters. Look for road signs. They're struggling with these high frequency words. Okay, then put them around your house all the time. There are tons of strategies you can do at home to leverage those little moments of learning that a lot of times there are so few teachers in this country that won't go the extra mile for you if you ask and you're genuinely interested. So I really encourage that communication and supplemental learning at home. I want to just jump over to disability awareness programming, and then I'm going to kick it to Ryan to talk about our virtual school presence, because that was something big we did this year that was kind of cool. We want to share with you. But our school does a disability awareness program. Ours is through the Cromwell Center, which I did not do the research to figure out whether that's a national center or it's a Maine center. But they go into Maine schools and they do disability awareness programming, with entire grades, much like you were just talking about with we brought all the kindergartens and we talked about it, we asked questions, but it's related to all disabilities, and it's been really interesting to watch that empower not only our kiddo, but then other kiddos that have challenges, and then their friends to be really good advocates. So I might ask the question about whether your school does any disability, and that would be a K-12 strategy in my opinion. Does your school do disability awareness programming? If not, find out if it's out there. Check out the Cromwell Center. As I said, I don't know if they're national, but they might be able to connect someone in your part of the world and encourage that to get into your schools, because I think that universal education for kids is so, so important. Okay. Okay, so we're very special. But look around, because I'm sure something like that exists in your area.
So the virtual presence thing, in Kate's first couple of years at school, she would just get worn down and would go through these spells where she just misses an entire week of school, and it bleeds over into the next weekend, or it's the end of one week and it's the entire next week because she just catches something that just knocks her down. So what we did starting after winter break was she just stayed home every Wednesday. And when we tried to push through for the whole week, she'd miss Friday. She just couldn't do the whole week. And she stayed home every Wednesday. She has an iPad. The teacher brought her iPad in from home, and she just FaceTimed into class. And eventually the school gave us one. And they'd put a little stand out, and she'd sit with the iPad on the stand, and it was the K-Tron 2000. 3,000, and she'd have a friend that wheeled her around, and she'd get to participate virtually in the lessons. The teacher would on Fridays, much like Jen, send home the work for the next week so that we'd have it there. We had a copy of the workbooks and so that she could do that work and follow along with the class. And some weeks it didn't work. Sometimes the Wi-Fi would be down. But what we found this spring was that she didn't have one of those stretches where she missed this big chunk of school, because she was able to sleep in those days. And whenever she got up and got ready for school, then she'd FaceTime in. So that was something that worked really well for us this year. To come back to the germs question, yeah, especially if you have any sort of immune complications. Kate's spleen's big, and so that's affecting white blood cell counts. We brought that to our teachers' attention. We brought that to our school's attention. First grade, they actually, there was a couple other kids who had some immune problems, and they actually just wiped down all of the desks every single day after school that was kind of above and beyond the normal cleaning that happened, because we reached out to the school and said, this is a concern for us. You know, what can we do about it?
Although I might add that we had a few outbreaks in our area, and we were sort of waiting for if such an outbreak happened in our school, she would have been doing virtual school full-time until it cleared. And it was not ideal. There were things that worked really well, and there were things that didn't. But if anyone's really interested in that, I'm happy to talk with them more about what went well and what was challenging. But it was a really interesting option that actually our school offered to us. So it was very cool that she did that.
I just have probably a question for you guys, because something I run into with my patients, Alagille and some chronic disease, is that unfortunately when they have a long period of absence, they don't have a nice transition back to school. And I would like to know how you deal with that, because I have to be very creative about it, because the school district not necessarily have that kind of transition back, like a kid was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, even though you try to keep them as much involved as possible through the hospital with school, but sometimes they cannot participate. Any advice there?
It's like a super hard question, so thank you for that. Yeah, so it's the transition back is hard when you've missed a chunk of time, and particularly like most of the time when she's out because she can't, having it at home isn't necessarily gonna help, because she's out because she doesn't feel good. And so learning is just that much harder, not to mention, there's a thing about when the parent is the teacher, no matter, I want to say to her, like, I have a master's degree in this, I don't care, mommy, it's not how they do it. So there's that. But so the transmission back is super hard. So a couple of tips. When you're in the heat of a hospitalization, it's just let school go. Like, let learning go. It is what it is. I promise you, most of the time, kids catch up. Every kid I've seen that I'm thinking, and I look at the data of every school every kiddo in my district, and we problem solve every kid who's behind. And I think, oh gosh, this is the kid I'm not gonna be able to get caught up. It's not gonna happen. And then all of a sudden, something clicks, and get out of that kid's way. So to a certain degree, give yourselves a break that, yeah, they're probably gonna fall behind in their learning. That's okay. We want them to be healthy. We can deal with the learning later. So cut yourself a little bit of a break there. What I would say is when you start getting ready to go back to school is when you should be talking to the teacher. I'm afraid of what they've missed. This is the amount of schooling they were able to do. I'm not so sure about this. What do we need to think about? And I would do that as a face-to-face meeting. And I would be going over, where are they in their assessments? What is it that they need? And then have that focused conversation with your teacher to say, okay, with whatever we have left in the school year, what's the most important thing that we're gonna be focusing on? And how can we focus on that together? She's not gonna do all of this. What's the most important pieces? The other piece would be, I'm a big fan of slow transitions. So back to school for 2 days, and then 3 days, and then 5 days. School is a stamina thing. We used to talk about when kindergarten went to, in our state, went to full day, 5 days a week. You spend the whole first 6 months just teaching the kids stamina to get through a full day of school. It's exhausting. So you don't want to set your kid back by sending them back too quickly. So I think I would be really thoughtful about trying to transition that slowly. And again, if you can get kind of a virtual presence option, and then that's one too I would recommend for hospitals when they're in long hospital stays, even if they're not coming in for significant learning, at least coming in for that social check-in to see their friends and have their friends see them is incredibly important for kiddos and for not only your kiddo that's in the hospital, but for the kiddos in their class too. I feel like I got a little off topic. Where am I going?
Ruben, I've got a question for you. So we've heard a lot about how families are actually interacting with the school. What are some of your ideas and thoughts on best practices to work with providers to get the support we need to take to the schools?
Now I got a hard question. No, I think it's the first thing is as a provider, you have to remain engaged. I'm not a primary care person, obviously. I'm a specialist, but still I have to care. I think that shouldn't be an excuse. I particularly advise first is to get a good understanding of the medical condition of each individual and be active for the school to understand that. Some schools, and this is not even a district, this is the particular school sometimes, even in the same district you have differences. Then some schools in one district just get it down right away. They got engaged principal, they got engaged teachers, they got all these people that they get it right away. They know what they need to do because of previous experience, because they invested or whatever the reason is. But sometimes they become a challenge, the schools that they don't get it sometimes. It's hard. Then you have to be more active about sending letters, even talking. I have talked to principals sometimes. I have talked to teachers sometimes. I have to do it. That's part of that's important. It's not just a medication. It's also the mental well-being, or it's part of the health. Then I think we as a physician have to also be part of that. And then most of the time, I will tell you, when it comes from us, it really sends a strong statement to them, because they know that we will go all the way and put a lot of pressure through understanding of, I get a lot of support from the social worker and other medical staff that, in the understanding of the law of the states also, each state has their own. I mean, there are federal laws, obviously, but there are also, each state is going to have its own, and then you have to be aware of them and push them really hard. But I think you have to, it's important when the physician can make a difference sometimes, because if not, the family is going to be limping along if you don't intervene. That's been my experience.
I think I would just add to it that I really appreciate that all our specialists ask us at every appointment, how's she doing in school? And when they ask that question, they don't mean just academically, even though they get way more detailed an answer than they ever wanted from me. They mean socially too, which is important. Just that question goes a long way.
So I wanted to go back to Dr. Quiroz' question about transitioning into school after long hospital stays, because mine did have a period where she was out of school for an entire month. Know your kid's schedule. Know your students, your patient's schedule, because, for example, this year she had everything before lunch. And after lunch, all she had was reading and recess. And so I would take her to school for half a day. Or if she goes in and she has recess early in the day, I'll take her in a little later every day. I will take her to school every day, but I will take her for less amounts of time. And sometimes that a doctor can certify this is the time that the kid can spend in school, helps us with that transition.
That's a super great point. We did something similar. We looked at what is her daily schedule and made sure she went for the really important parts of the day. Lunch and recess, not so much. So I really could spend all day talking about this, but I want to make sure we get to some middle school pieces as well. So take a second to talk about the transition to middle. So what's different about middle school in every state and country and school does it a little bit differently, but if we had to go generally speaking, I think the big things let me start with middle school. I love middle school. It's my favorite place to go. I would ask you to take a minute and just remember what it was like to be in your middle school body. You have all these hormones coursing through your body. Look at Stephanie's like, I'm not doing it. And your highs have never been higher and your lows have never been lower. And it's like, and you don't know why, right? Because it's these chemicals in your body that are just like making you crazy. And that's what middle school is, right? Every school board I've ever worked with says, well, our middle school is a mess. And I go, guess what? Every middle school is a mess. They're doing the best they can in the bodies that they have that are just really betraying them on how many times have you seen someone that looks and goes, I don't even know why I'm crying. And you just go, oh, I know. It's because, and then you start explaining the hormones in the brain and they look at you like, oh no, I didn't want to know that. So I stopped doing that. But it's totally natural, right? And to feel so completely angry about something that really shouldn't be angry. It's not that they're crazy, that's what their body's doing to them. And so middle school is this incredibly interesting time. And with every kid developing a little different, you never see it more than you see in middle school. Like you'll go into a 7th grade class and there'll be this girl who looks like she's 30 sitting next to a little boy who looks like he should be in kindergarten. And they're like the same age and they're supposed to interact and be social together. And it's an incredibly, like if you can get past all the other stuff, it's an incredibly beautiful and exciting time in their life, but we gotta give them skills to help them manage all of that stuff that's coming at them. So I'm gonna talk about the second two, and I'm gonna have him talk about that transition piece a little bit, because I want him to bring in that teacher perspective. In elementary, kids start to realize they're different. Alagille warriors start to realize they're different. Certainly, in middle school, it becomes that much more evident. Why? Goes back to what I was just saying. Every person's body, every kid's body is changing, and they have all these hormones they've never had before. This is when we start saying, wow, you're a really incredibly smart kid. Why did you do that really silly thing? Because their brain it's like it's betraying them. And so they start making really bad choices. And some of those really bad choices are related to they are so insecure in their own skin that they act out towards others to try to help themselves feel more secure, right? I don't know what my body is doing, and I'm afraid someone else is going to notice. So I'm going to point out this other kid who's different, and then no one will pay attention to me. Roberta is like, move it along. So super, super important. I would love to tell you I have like a total like magic bullet for bullying. I don't. I think understanding is a perfectly important thing. Understand where kids are coming from. They're not treating other children differently most of the time or poorly because they have some underlying hate. It's because they're just in a place themselves that they can't handle it. And so I think sometimes when you come at it from that, it deflates the entire argument and you get much farther. But then making sure you're paying attention to your kid, paying attention to what's going on in school. Don't be afraid to call the school. Middle school, you're supposed to start like letting your kid be independent. Yes, please do that. It doesn't mean you stop calling school. They need you now more than ever. And then mental health support. So I am a firm believer that I might almost say every kid should be in therapy, but realistically, every kid who has a major challenge like our kiddos do, whether they are actively having trouble or not, should have a therapist, should have a social worker, should have someone that they are going to see on a regular basis because it will give them the tools to deal with it when they start to have trouble. And when they have trouble, they will already have a relationship with someone who they know they can help, okay? So that's what about the siblings?
What about the siblings? Should they also have a therapist?
So back to my first, I think everybody should be in therapy. And I say I'm not, which is like so hypocritical. I think yes. I think being a sibling, we really struggle with that, and it's super fun when your kid's in the room and you have to say that. Ellen gets neglected a lot of the time because we have to do things with Kate, and it's, it's not like we're doing something special. We're going to the hospital. Like, it's not fun. But still, that's time that she's not getting time and attention. And I think, and I guess I'll speak personally, like, so as an older sister of a kiddo who has some medical challenges, you feel really overlooked. And it's not fair. And in middle school, when it's already not fair, like nothing is fair in life when you're a middle schooler, to have that going on too, life is extra not fair. And so for me, not even as much for the skills part, but for them to have someone who is only theirs to listen to. And so whenever we see Kate's person, I say what you do is between the two of you, and you can tell us, or you can opt not to, but she is your person, and she owes us nothing.
I have something about that. Oh, that's loud. So my son Damien, he's a little extra. He's got selective mutism and other things. So being in therapy has been a huge way to kind of deal with that. But some weeks, honestly, he would rather us skip a medical appointment just to go to therapy. And we've seen, especially since moving, we've had to go to a couple different places. And a lot of times they'll be like, especially in the beginning, they'll want the parent to come in and have a little time to discuss that. Never, ever go and like, if you want to go in and just play and not have discussion time with them, just to meet them and transition out of the room. But my biggest thing is when you go start doing therapy, don't have any discussion time in front of them unless that's their time. He can go in there, he can talk about, you know, being a divorced family, he can talk about school, he can talk about appointments. That's his time. And then we make one appointment once a month to go in and discuss without him the net and gritty and things that they've seen and discovered. But honestly, he's been going to therapy since he was 2. And that's, I mean, it's been like once a week. We can see a huge difference when some places are like, let's try once a month or let's do this and that. And when he misses a week, like it's a big deal for him. We can see a huge success. And I know it's hard. He has so many medical appointments some weeks, but if he has to cancel due to feeling sick or whatever, like there's a huge difference in how he approaches his week and his appointments. So for us, that's just as critical as medical appointments.
And I think you made a really good point too. I got someone over here about that match. You have to have a good match. And if your therapist is not the right match, like don't apologize about moving on. There's nothing wrong with that. I think over here, okay, perfect.
Am I going?
Yeah.
Am I going? Hi, everybody. I have 2 older children from my previous marriage, and they're older. My oldest is going to be 16 soon, and my second daughter, she is going to be turning 9, I don't remember when, this month, I think. Yeah, so anyhow, so 2 years ago, you know, she was 6, and when everything hit with Alistair, our son, who has Alagille, you know, it was really troubling to her, plus like the fact of, you know, she didn't see her biological dad a whole lot, and then we were really focused on him and everything that he was doing and all the meds and you all know everything that happens with infants, you know. So yeah, we took her to therapy. I mean, and I loved like what you shared about, you know, she wanted me there for support, but I was quiet unless she wanted me to speak, and I was able to relate on, you know, to her. But she was in therapy, I think, for a year. And it just made so much of a difference. She suffered like from anxiety. She was really focused and scared about death. She didn't understand what was happening. And even though Eli and I as parents, you know, like we're trying to explain everything at a kid level to her, it was just really, it was overwhelming, and she did not understand. So we found an awesome therapist. She did play therapy and just really connected and was great. And I suggest to anybody, if you have siblings of our children, you know, who are dealing with this, you know, that's an option. And I think, you know, at least for us, it just worked wonders. Yay, that's it.
To go to your sibling thing, in our area, there's a nationwide program called Sib Shop. And so if you look and see if they have a satellite for that in your area, or if there's, in our case, we don't have it, we have similar program offered. I've actually gone to to our school district and asked them to start putting that in the schools too, like they do the military child support groups. But it's just once a month where our big kids can go in and be like, this thing stinks, she gets a lot of attention, my mom doesn't have time for me, all those things. It was a big help. And if you don't have opportunity for that, they actually gave my big kids a book called the Sibling Slam Book. And it was like asked, you know, so many siblings, these 30 questions, and they're just super honest answers to it, and gave them a point of identification and familiarity.
That's huge. So huge. It's so huge. And then I guess the piece I would just add as a district administrator, please be communicating with your school about what's going on. You know, they're having therapy, and that's really all they need to know. They don't need the details. But what you want is for your person at school, if they're seeing something, to let you know so that can be relayed to the therapist and vice versa when appropriate. And it's a fine line, right? So our person's name is Jamie, and Jamie is Kate's, and Kate is Jamie, and what they do is she's thumbs up. She loves Jamie, but that's their time. And we don't know anything that goes on. But if Jamie ever were to recognize something that was really concerning, she would tell us, and we would tell the school. And so that communication, sometimes the schools are seeing something that would mean something to the therapist and vice versa. So that communication is key. I just got the 10-minute mark, so reporting mark.
What are some strategies to help educate teachers, administrators, and little kids on, hey, the itching aspect of it, you know, that they're not going to spread it, or, you know, it's just kind of what we do? Thoughts?
That's like a huge question. And I think I want to talk about it related to middle school, because I think that's a little bit what we haven't talked about yet, where we're making that transition from one teacher. So how we communicate to one is a little bit easier than how your kid has 3 teachers, or when they get to high school, they have maybe 6, maybe they have 7 teachers, and it becomes like you have to get really good at it in order to reach that many people. So I might kick it over to our resident high school teacher over here to maybe speak to that a little bit.
To speak to the itch, or yeah. So as a teacher, especially a high school teacher, I have anywhere from 60 to 80 to 120 kids in my classes. I am very responsive to replies, and one of the things that works really well is, this is what's going on with my kid. I want to let you know what are your thoughts, what do you observe from the classroom level. From a practical perspective with the itching, that was one of our big concerns coming into school with Kate. So, you know, just getting written into some of the documentation that, you know, she can take her shoes off, because maybe some teacher's just going to say, no, you can't take your shoes off. You can take your shoes off. Have tools available to them from a ability to kind of help self-soothe that with her was big for us.
You know, wiggle seats, bouncy balls, all that good stuff. But I would say that it's getting it into your documentation for whatever your state and or country requires is great. I'd be ready with the cheat sheet. Most of the time, as hard as we try, I don't necessarily get the 504 or the IEP to my teachers until maybe a day or 2 before school starts. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's not till after school starts. So we're going in with these kids and you don't have and then these reports are like pages and pages and pages of long. So to be able to say to, hey teacher, I know you have the 504 and I look forward to you reading it, but you know what? Here's the 3 bullet points you need to know. This kid can get up and move around whenever they need to move around. This kid, needs to be able to take their shoes off. They need to be in a cool room, like whatever it is. But those bullet points for someone who has 120 kids, and Ryan is a teacher that reads every one of them. He reads every one of them, but not every teacher does. So the bullet points is super important.
Hello. All right. I think like it all comes down to communication early and often. And I know for us and not just for me and my family, but at our school, if there's a child with a reasonably special need or whatever, we always open it up for the parent to come right to a staff meeting and just do a face-to-face with the whole staff and say, look, this is my child. You may not deal with them on a daily basis, but you may see him in the hall. You may see other students interacting with him. This is what he's dealing with on a daily thing. If you see him not wearing his shoes, that was a big one, because he hates socks. He never wears socks. He doesn't like his shoes. You know, if he's not wearing his indoor shoes, like most of the kids are like, oh, get your indoor shoes on. Don't worry about it. That's one of his things. He needs to itch his feet. That's okay. And we just go in and tell them all, because it's a community. The whole school as a community now, and I mean, I'm lucky because I actually teach at that school. But we've had other parents come in and talk about their diabetic kid or whatever it happens to be. And when the teacher can see you face to face and even know that, okay, in 5 years I'm going to be teaching this child, they pay attention and they get that personal connection. It's like coming here and talking to the other families and talking with the doctors is the same thing. You get that personal connection, and that's important. They can read I don't know, yours are different, your 504s, your IEPs, but until you listen to the family, a lot of that stuff gets glazed over or you don't understand it. If you say, if they read, oh, this child is itchy, it's not a big deal, but when you hear the parent talk about the itchiness and that, you know, and once your child is to an age or some children are more comfortable, have them do the presentation to the classroom and talk to their peers. And we, you know, my wife went right into the school and had a whole big presentation that she did to a kindergarten class, and now all of his friends, they look after him. Like, they'll come tell a teacher, oh, you know, Cord's doing this, and you know, they're keeping an eye on him too. So it's just be open and honest and tell them, and don't be afraid to call. Don't be afraid to talk to a teacher directly. Teachers love to help kids. So, but if we don't know, we don't know. So.
So we're in the process of transitioning into middle school right now. We just finished elementary and moving into middle school. And we had a very informal relationship with elementary school, and it worked out really well. Now that we're moving to middle school, they're asking us to be a lot more precise. So one of the things that all of the doctors are saying, if your kid hits a head, you know, they need to be taken to ER, CT needs to be done. So they're asking us to identify exactly what symptoms do they need to react to. And we are struggling to come up with a proper list. And I'm hoping somebody here can help us and other families to know exactly. I mean, if we just say whenever she hits her head, she already hit her head probably, I don't know, a dozen times in her life, and we don't take her to the emergency room every single time, I think it's, you know, we don't want to subject her to CT every single time. And we don't want school to overreact either. But we do now in a position where we need to give them a proper list. And I wonder if anybody can help with that.
So I might kick it to our medical friends, make you a real list. But what I would do, call me. If she hits her head, call me, and I will make the decision about whether she needs to go to the ER or not. Because I think the challenge you have there is any list is not going to be perfect. It's going to be missing things that were really important. And so to a certain degree, it's such a judgment call here because I don't think there's a ton of detail. So I say, the law may or may not agree with me, but I believe in mostly compliant, is that it says if they get a blow to the head or if they get a blow to the abdomen, the parent must be contacted immediately. And then you're the one that's making the call about whether she goes or not. So that's very precise. It's a precise action. They don't need a list of symptoms. They shouldn't be the ones really making the call for you. Like, let them push the decision to you, would be my advice.
So wait, I have one more question. Dr. Quiros, when children are going through activity like gym class, where they have a mile run coming up, how are you as a specialist working with families to give activity forgiveness for these things? I know I had to lean on our specialists to give forgiveness for certain activities that were too much. And can you speak to that? Because I think our families need to know that when they do have these situations like the mile or gym class or a field trip or something that's more intense, that they can have cooperation with the doctors to understand that they can maybe get activity forgiveness with a note or something to be open with you about what's happening in their day-to-day.
Yes, I think that's a very important point. I think you have to, again, work on tailor it down to each patient because there is very variable. But I, as a doctor, I will have a good understanding of the physical activity that my patient will be able to tolerate, and think we have to be active and realistic about it. I think, yes, we want our kids to be as normal as possible, but also we don't want to push them unnecessarily or put them at risk because of, we don't want to get into, overall with the teenagers that we were talking about, that they really push hard not to be kind of different or so forth. I think you are entitled to asking your doctor to write a note. That's your right. And depending upon each state, I practice different states and with different insurance. And sometimes that note coming from your specialist is fine. Sometimes they want you to come from the PCP or the pediatrician, I should say, or family medicine. depending upon some things. But in general, the specialists in most of the places can write something down. They would defer. But for instance, if it's a heart condition, I probably would defer to my cardiology colleague to give a little bit of more insight on that area. If it's a liver problem or more of a general problem, as a pediatric gastroenterologist, feel comfortable dealing with most of them. But I'm more than happy with my patients to be that point person to define what kind of specialist needs to write that particular note in regard to excuses for physical activity. And we don't have to, I think, the other thing is that they can participate. I mean, sometimes also, unfortunately, I have run into schools that rather leave the kid behind because they don't want to make any special arrangement. Then I have run into different situations. I try to be as honest as possible throughout my career. And you really have to push them hard. I mean, you have to accommodate for the kid. If the kid cannot run around, well, you have to figure out who is going to be with that kid walking around and while the other are running. Then I think you also have to push it a little bit because your children should not be excluded from activities, school activities, just because something is convenient for the people that are chaperoning the activity.
Yeah, I think we're
All right. So that wraps up what I think was a really good hour, getting ready to send Gabe to school. So really thank you for everyone for sharing and the questions that were asked. Thanks for the panelists for kind of leading it. And so far the best news of the hour is it's lunchtime. So enjoy lunch.